Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today you join me for a topic that I find quite fascinating, and that is the wonderful world of plants. So what is a plant? So a plant is when we strike the cue ball onto one ball, makes contact with the second, and hopefully we pot it into the pocket. So there's so many variations of different plants. There's different distances between the two object balls. Plants that are offset, so not exactly in line with the pocket like this one is. Balls that are touching and offset. So when they're touching, there's something called the squeeze effect that comes into play. So we're going to cover all these situations. So when they do arise in your practice or match, you're well equipped to deal with the situation. So let's start with the very basic plant. So we've got about 2-inch gap between these two reds. So as you can see, everything is in a straight line. So in order to pot this second red, we need to work out where we need to hit on this first red with the cue ball in order to make the pot. So because everything's in a straight line, we're going to aim center of the cue ball to hit center of the first red, which will then make contact with the second and will obviously make the pot. So center of the first two balls. So that's pretty straightforward. So if we now had the same shot, but we've now got a bigger distance between the balls. So now we've probably got 6 inches, 7 inches between the two reds. Now we have to be a little bit more accurate when striking this first ball. Because the distance has now increased before it gets to the second ball, we need to be more accurate. But still, these balls are in a direct line, so we still need to aim center of the cue ball to hit center of the first red, and then obviously we'll hopefully make the plant. So we'll play this again. So we might not pot it directly in the middle, but we did. That was pretty perfect. So when the gap does increase between these two object balls, obviously we have to be a lot more accurate on this first ball. Unless obviously the second ball is right over the pocket, and then we don't have to be as accurate at all because we're so close to the pocket. So that's your basic plant. So what now if we had a plant with a similar distance to the first one? So we've probably got 2 inches, 2 and a bit inches, but the plant is now what we call offset, so it's not in line with the pocket. So the first thing I would do is forget that the cue ball is there for a second, come round to the potting angle. So imagine this first red is now your cue ball. So where do I have to aim on this cue ball to make this red go in the pocket? So I think about there. So I've got a point on the red there. So I'm going to keep that in my mind. Come round to the cue ball. We're going to strike center of the cue ball to hit this point we've got in our mind, and obviously make contact with the second red and make the pot. So we've made the pot, not too clean, but obviously when the balls are a little bit more offset, it now becomes a little bit more difficult. So now let's have a look at the plants when the balls are touching and dead straight. So this is a dead set plant. So in order to pot that second red, obviously we need to hit center on the first red, center on the cue ball, and we're going to make the pot. So that's pretty straightforward. No problems. So we'll set this up again. Now because people think that the balls are touching, the plant's dead set, that you possibly can't miss it. So that's not quite the case. So when these balls hit together, they all make contact at the same time, and there's going to be something that's called a squeeze. So it's going to change the angle of what this second red comes off at. So obviously to make that pot, we would hit centre of the first red. If we were now to aim either left or right on the first red, the balls will squeeze. If we hit left, the ball will squeeze and we'll miss it slightly to the right of the pocket. So left on the red, ball squeezes and we miss to the right of the pocket, and that's exactly the same on the other side. So balls are touching, we aim right on the first red, the ball squeeze and we miss it to the left jaw. Okay, so if we have now two balls that are touching that are dead straight, and we now have an angle shot, so if we were now here, obviously people think the plant's dead set, we just have to hit this first red and the next one goes in. But obviously we're going to get the squeeze effect. There's going to be friction between all balls and the angle is going to change. So if we play this and hit this red full in the face there from this angle, you'll get the squeeze effect and you'll miss the ball to this side again. So going back to that very first shot that we played when we're directly behind the ball, if the cue ball is now there, we have to hit the same point as we did when the cue ball was here. So right on this point here. So coming from the side, we know if we hit this ball too full, so not on the edge, if we hit it too full, you're going to get that friction, there's going to be a squeeze, and we're going to miss it to that jaw. So in order to pot this, we now have to aim here on the red, which will decrease the squeeze and will make the pot. So if we had this same similar shot where the balls are dead straight, but now we have a slight gap in the middle. So the two balls aren't touching. Again, if we were right behind the shot, all we have to do is aim centre of the cue ball, centre of the first red, and we're still going to pot that second red. So put them up again. Now a slight gap between those two reds. If we now hit either left or right, we should still be able to pot the ball. Because now there's a gap between the reds, all three balls aren't going to make contact at the same time and we're not going to get that squeeze effect. So if we aim slightly left, there's still a slight squeeze, but we can get away with making the pot. So same again, so slight gap, we'll hit the other side, the squeeze isn't quite as much and we still make that pot. So let's have a look at a shot where the balls are touching but not quite dead set. So the balls are touching, not quite dead set. Now, if we're behind this shot, and we hit this point on the cue ball, on the object ball here, the balls will not squeeze and they'll hit there on the cushion, like so. Same again. So if the balls are now touching, they're still aiming for this point on the cushion. If we now aim on the first red to this left hand side, we're now going to get the squeeze. So remember when they were dead set, if we aim slightly to the left, the ball went slightly to the right. so the plant is facing this jaw. If we hit left on the ball, you're going to get the squeeze, and now the ball's straighten up and we can make the angle. So same on the other side, balls are touching. If we obviously hit anywhere on this left side, the ball is going to hit there and we're going to miss. So if we aim slightly to the right of the first red, the ball squeeze and we make the pot. So what about shots that are just off straight, touching ball, but we're playing from an angle and not directly behind? So if we have this shot, balls are touching, so the plant is aiming for this cushion. So if we're in this position now, okay, we know from previous shots, if we aim here, exactly at this point, there's going to be no squeeze and we'll probably miss the ball there, okay? So remember those first shots we played earlier on? When the balls were straight and we played from this angle, we would miss the red here. But now these balls are just off straight this way, we can now hit this red full in the face. There'll be a slight squeeze and we'll pot the ball. So there becomes a point when these balls are now obviously touching but aiming here. Obviously if we aimed left, we know we would get that squeeze effect and we would pot the ball. If there's now a slight gap, probably a millimetre and a half, no matter what we do, this ball now cannot be potted at all. Because the three balls are not going to make contact at the same time, you're not going to get the squeeze effect and you're never going to be able to pot the ball. So no matter how left we hit on this shot, there's going to be no squeeze, the balls aren't making contact at the same time, and you're never going to pot it. So if we've got a gap of probably a millimetre or just over, you know that whatever we do, that shot cannot be potted. But obviously as the balls increase again in distance, they get further and further away, then obviously then that becomes the offset plant as in the first demonstration. So anything from probably 1 mil to 2 mil, we know that it's never going to be pottable. But as that gap increases, as we start getting to a couple of centimetres again, now the plant becomes makeable again. So there we go everyone, I hope you enjoyed the video on plants. As you can see, they're a little bit tricky, takes a little while just to get your head around. Obviously when the balls are touching, we just have to be careful because there's going to be a little bit of friction and it does cause that squeeze effect. So do give it a go yourself. Obviously different cloths provide different rates of friction, so it may be slightly different on your table, but I think you get the general idea of how plants work and obviously all the different variations of plants. So give that a go, let me know what you think. Any comments, please do leave in the comment section and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Again, if you do like the content, please like, share and subscribe. It does help massively for the channel. Also, if anyone would like one-to-one coaching with myself in this room, and online sessions are available, so do get in touch. But in the meantime, enjoy the video and we'll see you next time.